There is a pattern that repeats in every recession, every single one. And the pattern is this. The people who go into a recession with the right financial structure do not just survive it. They come out on the other side wealthier than they went in. And the people who go in without that structure, people who are otherwise smart, otherwise hardworking, otherwise doing everything right, get set back by years. This is not a motivational speech about resilience. This is arithmetic. And in the next 12 minutes, I am going to show you exactly what that structure looks like, exactly why recessions create wealth transfers from the unprepared to the prepared, and the 5 specific moves that decide which side of that transfer you end up on. Here is exactly what I am going to walk you through. Promise number 1 is the one financial condition that separates people who get richer in recessions from people who get poorer. And it is not income, not job security, and not luck. Promise number 2 is the specific asset class that historically outperforms in every recession on record, going back 100 years, and why most people avoid it at precisely the moment it becomes most valuable. Promise number 3 is the debt structure that protects you during a downturn, and the debt structure that destroys you, because not all debt behaves the same way when the economy contracts. Promise number 4 is the income move that has made more everyday millionaires during economic downturns than any other single strategy, and why the barrier to entry is lower in 2026 than it has ever been. And promise number 5 is the one mistake that turns a temporary financial setback into a permanent one, and how to make sure you do not make it. My name is Marcus. I cover personal finance and wealth building for people who are serious about the long game. So let me start with the pattern, because this is not opinion. This is historical record. In the recession of 2008 and 2009, home prices dropped an average of 30% nationally. Unemployment hit 10%. The S&P 500 fell 57% from peak to trough. By every conventional measure, it was a financial catastrophe. And yet, in the 4 years following that recession, more American households crossed the $1 million net worth threshold for the first time than in any comparable 4-year period in the prior 2 decades. The 2020 recession, the sharpest single-quarter contraction in recorded American history, lasted approximately 2 months in its most acute phase. The stock market fell 34% in 33 days. And then, over the following 18 months, the same stock market produced returns that many long-term investors had never seen in their careers. 2001, 1990, 1982. The pattern holds. The recession creates the conditions for wealth transfer. The question is always the same. Which direction does the transfer go for you? The answer comes down to one thing, and this is promise number 1. The one financial condition that separates the people who get richer from the people who get poorer in a recession is this: liquidity. Cash, or near cash, that is not committed to anything. Not income, not job security, not even investments. Liquidity. The ability to act when others cannot. Here is how the math works. In a recession, asset prices fall. Stocks fall. Real estate falls. Small businesses trade at lower valuations. People who need to sell because they have lost income, because they have debt they cannot service, because they have no buffer, sell at whatever price the market gives them. They have no choice. They are forced sellers. The person with liquidity is a buyer in a market full of forced sellers. That is the entire structure of every wealth transfer that happens in a recession. It is not complicated. It is not a secret. It is supply and demand in a specific kind of market. Warren Buffett has said in multiple shareholder letters that the single most important financial skill is the ability to be greedy when others are fearful. What he means in practical terms is have cash. Have cash before the downturn. Because during the downturn, cash is not a low-return asset. Cash is ammunition. The minimum target for recession liquidity is 6 months of total living expenses in a high-yield savings account. Not invested, not in the market. Liquid. In 2026, high-yield savings accounts are paying between 4 and 4.5%. That is not far below long-term inflation. The opportunity cost of holding that cash is lower than it has been in 15 years. There is no good argument against a 6-month emergency fund at current rates. Now, promise number 2. The asset class that outperforms in every recession on record. I am not talking about gold. Gold is fine. Gold is a hedge. But the asset class I am referring to has produced more generational wealth during downturns than any other, including gold. including bonds, including defensive stocks. I am talking about dividend-paying index funds. Here is why. In a recession, stock prices fall, but dividends from diversified low-cost index funds do not fall at the same rate. In some cases, they do not fall at all. The companies that pay consistent dividends, the large, established companies that have been paying dividends for decades, typically maintain those dividends through contractions because their underlying cash flows, while reduced, remain positive. What this means in practice is that the yield on a dividend-paying index fund increases when prices fall, because the dividend stays roughly constant while the price drops. In 2009, the dividend yield on the S&P 500 reached over 3% at the market trough, nearly double what it had been at the peak. If you were buying at the trough, you were locking in a 3% yield on investments that would, over the next 4 years, also appreciate 60% in price. You do not have to pick the exact bottom. You do not have to time anything perfectly. You need to do one thing. Keep buying on a fixed schedule, regardless of what the price is doing. This is called dollar cost averaging. It is the most boring strategy in personal finance, and it is one of the few strategies with a near-universal track record of working for long-term investors. The specific fund does not matter much. A low-cost total market index fund with dividends reinvested. Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, they all offer options with expense ratios under 0.05%. Set up automatic monthly contributions. Do not look at the price. The recession is not a reason to stop. The recession is the reason to continue, now. Promise number 3. Debt. Because debt is where recessions destroy people who were otherwise doing everything right. Not all debt is the same in a recession. There are 2 categories, and understanding the difference is critical. Category 1 is fixed, low-interest debt on appreciating or income-producing assets. A 30-year fixed mortgage at 3 or 4%. A student loan at 4% with an income-based repayment option. A business loan secured against real inventory. This debt is survivable in a recession. The payment is fixed. The asset, while it may decline in price temporarily, produces income or utility. You can service it. You are not a forced seller. Category 2 is variable, high-interest debt on depreciating or non-income producing assets. Credit card balances at 22 to 29%. Buy now, pay later agreements. Auto loans at 8% or above on a vehicle that loses 15% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. Personal loans at 15% for discretionary spending. In a recession, Category 2 debt becomes lethal. Interest rates on variable debt can rise. Income can contract. And every month you carry that balance. A portion of your income that could have been deployed as ammunition, as liquidity, is going to the bank instead. The recession preparation protocol for debt is straightforward. Eliminate all Category 2 debt before the downturn, starting with the highest interest rate. If you cannot eliminate it entirely, convert it. Transfer balances to 0% introductory rate cards. Refinance where possible. Reduce the payment as much as you can. The goal is to enter a downturn with the simplest, lowest, most fixed debt structure you can manage. I want to be direct about something. If you are carrying a $5,000 credit card balance at 24% interest, the investment question, whether to buy stocks or bonds or real estate, is irrelevant. There is no investment in the world that reliably returns 24%. Paying off that balance is a guaranteed 24% return. Do that first. Now. Promise number 4. The income move. In every recession on record, the businesses that survived and grew shared one common characteristic. They were not dependent on a single income source. They had what economists call revenue diversification, and what the rest of us call a side income. The specific opportunity that has produced more new wealth during downturns than any other single strategy is this: buying distressed income-producing assets at recession prices and operating them through the recovery. In the 2008 recession, investors who bought residential rental properties in markets like Phoenix, Detroit, and Atlanta at the trough made in some cases 5 to 10 times their initial investment over the following decade. They did not need to be large investors. They needed to be liquid, to have good credit, and to be willing to act when everyone else was retreating. In 2026, the equivalent opportunity is different in form but identical in principle. The assets you can buy and operate are not limited to real estate. Online businesses, content sites, e-commerce stores, service businesses trade on platforms like acquire.com at valuations tied to revenue multiples. In a recession, those multiples compress. A business generating $4,000 a month in profit that was selling for 40 to 50 times monthly revenue at the peak may sell for 20 to 25 times monthly revenue at the trough. You are buying the same income stream for half the price. The barrier to entry in 2026 is lower than it has ever been because the tools to acquire, operate, and grow a small online business have been democratized by AI. Customer service that required a full-time employee can now be automated. Content that required a team can now be produced by one person. The operational leverage that used to require scale is now available to individual buyers. I am not telling you to quit your job. I am telling you to build a second income source before the recession deepens, so that your household has revenue diversification when you need it most. Even a secondary income of $1,500 to $2,000 per month changes the math on your emergency fund, your investment contributions, and your ability to act on distressed assets. Now, promise number 5, the one mistake. The mistake that turns a temporary setback into a permanent one is not losing money in a recession. Losing money in a recession is almost universal. The mistake is liquidating long-term assets to cover short-term expenses. This is what happens. The recession arrives. Income drops. The emergency fund, if there is one, gets used. Then, when the emergency fund runs out, people sell their investments. They sell at the worst time, when prices are lowest. They lock in permanent losses. And when the recovery comes, they are not positioned to benefit from it because they have already sold. The protection against this mistake is the 6-month emergency fund I described in Promise 1. The emergency fund exists so that you never have to sell a long-term investment to cover a short-term expense. The two pools of money serve two completely different functions, and they must never mix. If your emergency fund is currently underfunded, if you have less than 3 months of expenses in liquid savings, the priority right now, before any investment question, is to build it. Cut discretionary spending. Sell things you no longer use. Work extra hours, whatever it takes. Because the emergency fund is not a financial product. It is the structural protection that allows every other strategy in this video to work. There is one more thing I want to say about recessions, because most financial content treats them purely as threats. A recession compresses asset prices. It compresses business valuations. It compresses competition. Many of your competitors will stop advertising, stop hiring, stop investing, which creates openings. It compresses the noise level because the speculative froth that drives asset prices to irrational highs disappears, and what's left is actual value. Charlie Munger said that all he wanted was to know where he was going to die so he could never go there. What he meant was, understand the failure modes and simply avoid them. The failure mode in a recession is running out of liquidity before the recovery arrives. That is the only failure mode that matters. Everything else is noise. 6 months of liquid cash. No high-interest variable debt. Consistent investment contributions regardless of price. A secondary income source if you can build one. And the discipline to not sell long-term assets to cover short-term expenses. That is the structure. That is the entire structure. It is not complicated. It is not exciting. And it works every time. If this video gave you something useful, hit the like button and subscribe. That is the most direct way to help this reach more people who need it. And if you have someone in your life, a friend, a sibling, a parent, who is heading into this economic environment without this structure, send them this video. The window to build liquidity, reduce debt, and position for the downturn is open right now. It closes quickly. I will see you in the next video.